I want to end the career of the anime apartheid streamer. She's going to be done after this one. She completely ignored everything about her idiotic argument and tried to like score a cheap ID politics win. You're not going to believe it. And if you do believe it, it's going to be explained to you why it's such a joke that she did this, okay? Here's her incredible vague tweet that everyone knows what she's talking about, right? My video debunking her ridiculous argument. Now, I'm going to explain what her argument was. If you don't believe me, you can go and watch the other video where the clip is in it. I deleted the clip or I would show it right here. And she deleted it too, so it's not easy to find. The context is that she said that people talk too much about Indigenous people in Canada and they don't focus enough on how great Canada is for people like her. People like her being privileged immigrants, you know, living on Indigenous land, while Indigenous people suffer and enjoy absolutely none of the privileges that she outlined as being the great parts about Canada. Incredibly stupid. And that was in the context of her arguing against decolonization, right? Arguing against defining the genocide of Indigenous people in Canada as genocide as well. All around absolutely abominable shit. And she somehow thought that was a good argument. She didn't really get it, how dumb it was. So she decided like, maybe if I claim to be a part of oppressed identity group X, I'll get off the hook here. My argument will magically make sense and it won't be totally stupid for me to just like say that people talk too much about the problems of Indigenous people and not enough about how good Canada is for someone like me. And, like, firstly, that makes no sense. The argument has little to do with what identity group she's a part of. You could be like a fucking black immigrant from Kenya or something going to Canada, you know, living a great life there and be like, man, it really makes me uncomfortable how much people talk about Indigenous issues here. Well, why don't they talk enough about how great Canada is for me compared to Kenya? And that would still be equally fucked up. So she mistook, like, me making fun of the fact that she is a white South African, and she is, which we're going to get into in a second, as the entire argument. That's what these people do all the time, right? Like, for example, you can like point to someone who's like saying, man, people should stop talking about Indigenous issues in the USA because, you know, things are pretty good here for me, and I think the US doesn't get enough credit, right? A good response to that would be, well, things are probably good for you because you're not Indigenous. Things are probably good for you because you're white, right? And then they'll respond to you like saying, well, you're right, white too. And they mistake like that as being the entire argument. No. The argument isn't that you're white, it's that you have this idea that your country is great because you are white, because you don't endure any of the shit that the Indigenous people there endure, because you aren't genocided for your land, which you're currently living on, by the way, you're living on their land. It's totally possible to be a white person from the US or Canada, or an immigrant to Canada or the US or whatever country, and be like, yeah, hell yeah, I support Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination and decolonization. The problem isn't that. The problem is that you need to be able to be able to look past your own biases and your own privileges and understand that just because things are good for you, that's not a good argument of settler colonial nation state keeping the land that they stole. Very similar sort of argument would be like, I moved to Poland after the Nazis colonized it during World War II. And you know, things are pretty good for me. Sure, like they deported my neighbor to a death camp, but I mean, I'm enjoying it here. I have tons of food, you know? I'm living in this awesome apartment that was previously owned by a Jew, but don't tell anyone about that. You know, who cares? It's good for me. You know, people focus way too much on the Holocaust ongoing right next door. Why don't they focus enough on how good this is for me? Same sort of logic, same sort of shit. Totally stupid. So she opted very wisely, I might add, because her take was not only just incredibly stupid, like literally like something that a 10-year-old child might say, but also completely indefensible. And she opted to go for the ID politic, for the, I'm not white. For one, this is an irrelevant argument. It's totally irrelevant. She's mistaking me making fun of her for being a white South African with that being the entire argument. Ad hominem is only an ad hominem if the entire argument is like, you're white, okay? Not, you're white and therefore you're thinking about this issue based on your material conditions as a white person benefiting from the Indigenous genocide. It's not the same thing. One of those is an argument based on material reality. The other one is just like a random insult. But these people hear you're white and they get fucking they go crazy. They can't take it. So they just divorce it from any context. But even regardless of that, what she's relying on here is racist, North American, and also Australian ideas of blood quantum defining one's whiteness. That's not true. Whiteness isn't an ethnicity. Whiteness doesn't physically exist. What whiteness is a set of legal justifications in order to categorize people into a dominant group and exclude others from that group. That's what it is, and that's what it always has been. And South Africa was one of the last countries that had whiteness formally codified into law. Okay? So it doesn't fucking matter if you have Central Asian ancestry. That means fucking nothing. I have fucking like what? I have tons of Turkic ancestry because my family is Greek and they were from fucking Anatolia. Okay, which today is part of Turkey. Does that make me an oppressed fucking Turkic person? Which, by the way, a lot of Central Asians are also Turkic as well. No, it fucking doesn't. I don't speak the language. I have literally zero vestiges of the culture. You can't look at me and be like, wow, that guy's definitely not white. That's not how it fucking works. That's not how it works anywhere in the world. You're not fucking Central Asian because, you know, you have fucking a great-grandma who was from Central Asia. By the way, Central Asian means nothing. A lot of people in Central Asia are very much white. Central Asia borders the Caucasus, which is where the word Caucasian comes from. That's so meaningless. And for two, like, what does this mean anyway? It's really gross how often people wipe away my Central Asian ancestry just because it doesn't show in skin color. You're a fucking anime. You're an anime avatar. No one knows what you look like. You're a fucking anime. You chose for your anime avatar to look like a generic white. What does that even mean? And for two, yeah, if it doesn't show, if you have zero cultural vestiges of whatever Central Asian means to you, clearly means nothing to you because you aren't even specific about where in Central Asia, which is a highly diverse region. You have no vestiges of the culture. You don't speak the language. And it doesn't show up looking at you at all. Functionally, you are not Central Asian in any meaningful respect at all. Least of all, in South Africa. Who wants to learn about South African racial laws? Do you think that South Africa defined race? Where she's from South Africa, by the way, if you don't know why I'm talking about it. She is a white South African from South Africa. How was race defined in South Africa? Let's find out. Now, the quintessential race law in South Africa was the Population Registration Bill of 1950. How was white defined? A white person is one who in appearance or who is generally accepted as a white person. In appearance or who is generally accepted as a white person, okay? If it doesn't show in your skin color, you live as a white person among white people, absorbed in white culture with absolutely no linguistic or cultural vestiges of whatever random Central Asian ethnicity you're claiming, like some sort of fucking Elizabeth Warren. It doesn't matter. You are legally white in South Africa. Your family is from South Africa. You lived in South Africa. You enjoyed all the benefits of being white in South Africa because you were white in South Africa. Very simple. You're not going to get out of this by appealing to like dumbass Canadian and United Statesian obsessions with blood quantum. That's not how it works. You're not non-white just because your great-grandpa wasn't white. Whiteness is a social construct. It's not based on ancestry. The only time it's based on ancestry is when it like literally legally is and materially is. You're not affected by your supposed non-whiteness in any way. In fact, you benefited from being legally white within South Africa. Your family did. You are a white South African. You are an inheritor of apartheid. And the fact that you go to Canada and essentially argue for what is, in all meaningful respects, Canadian apartheid by saying that it benefits you, and therefore people should stop talking about it so much. You know, they need to stop talking about Canada Indigenous so much, is the way that she put it. That is disgusting. There were plenty of great white South Africans. In the very same trial that put Nelson Mandela into jail, there were multiple white South Africans who went to jail at the same time because they were involved in everything that he was involved in. What makes a white South African a bad person isn't that they're a white South African, though they are very, very, very likely to be a bad person for material reasons because they come from the dominant class in a country which had legally codified apartheid until 1991. What makes you a bad person as a white South African is that you fucking go to Canada and apologize for what is, for all intents and purposes, apartheid. Not just apartheid, but apartheid on conquered land. So it's just a fucking joke to like appeal to some random ancestry that she thinks she has, which, you know, who fucking knows if she even has it? She's a literal anime. No one knows who she is. No one can confirm any of this. And it doesn't matter either way because her argument is a fucking joke. And her argument would have been a joke if she was literally a black African or from China or whatever. The fact that her argument was bad has nothing to do with her being white. The reason why her whiteness is relevant here is because she comes from an incredibly privileged background, and that privilege is a side effect of her being considered white. It's not literally some innate property that she has. That's what's wrong with these people, right? They don't understand material reality. They don't understand systemic problems. They don't understand anything. Like, they see me being like, well, yeah, of course Canada is great for you. You're not one of the people whose land this was stolen from to give you all of those benefits. And they're like, but you're white too. What the fuck does that mean? I'm not fucking there arguing about how great Canada is for me and using that as a bludgeon against fucking Indigenous people, using that to like delegitimize people talking about Indigenous people. Here, I'll show you the clip just for the context. Her argument is a total joke. It's so stupid. The dumbest thing you'll ever hear. I think this is where it starts.
And I think in general, lefties on Twitter and all of that kind of stuff, I think that they have like a bias of only focusing on the negative stuff. And those negative things are important.
Like, she said it right there, right? People only focus on the negative stuff about Canada.
Right? Like, they're not putting it in the context. And their context is usually their lens is very narrow. They're thinking Canada, Indigenous, Canada, Indigenous.
There you go, right? Their lens is very narrow. They're talking about Indigenous people in Canada. They look at Canada and they're like, oh, the Indigenous people there who land was stolen from and who now live in abject poverty on average, who now are completely ridiculously oppressed. They talk about them too much, right? That's clearly what she was saying there. And then she goes on to like list all the things about Canada that benefit her. What she's clearly saying there, in no uncertain terms, is the land theft of these Indigenous people, their oppression benefits me. People should acknowledge that as a good thing. It's no fucking different to a white South African, which she literally is, being like, okay, yeah, so people are like, South Africa, apartheid, South Africa, apartheid. But I think that people don't appreciate enough what apartheid in South Africa does for me as a white person here, okay?
I mean, I'll give you an example. Is in Canada, it's kind of just a given that if you don't listen to the police, they're not going to shoot you. Where I come from in South Africa, if you don't listen to the police, they might shoot you or they might rape you.
That's basically what this entire video was, okay? She just lists off these things that she thinks about are great about Canada as compared to South Africa, which, by the way, is complete bullshit because South Africa for her was like a fucking paradise, absolutely. The only reason that she and her family left is because apartheid ended. That's a simple fact. And yeah, obviously police brutality against Indigenous people in Canada is absolutely absurd. They literally fucking murder Indigenous people all the fucking time there. I mean, the police in Canada dumped Indigenous people in the middle of nowhere in the cold and left them out to die. And she's here like, oh, the police in Canada is so good for me. Why are they good for you? Well, you were born into a white South African family. You and your family moved from South Africa, curiously, after white minority rule ended, to Canada, another country that has ruthlessly oppressed its Indigenous people for centuries. That is why you are able to enjoy those great things about Canada, because the basis of those great things for people like you is genocide. Very simple. You argue in favor of these things. You argue against people focusing too much on Indigenous issues in Canada and not talking enough about how great things are for people like me who are enjoying the fruits of that stolen land. What you're doing there is apologizing for genocide. You're apologizing for colonization. It's very simple. You're being like, why don't people talk about the good parts that resulted from this genocide? Why don't people talk about the way that these people suffer so that people like me can thrive? And that she immediately went for the cheapest little faux woke identity politics argument, despite the fact that she is literally a white South African by South African law, as we just went over, is totally absurd. It just goes to show how dumb North Americans are. Like, they see someone's like, just so gross they wipe away my Central Asian ancestry. That's so fucking meaningless. Most people have some ancestor, at least 2 or 3 generations removed, who would not be considered white. That doesn't make you not white. Whiteness is a social status. It's not a literal, immutable part of your being. She's considered white, not just in South Africa, but also in North America too. Like, honestly, how fucking absurd would it be if you talk to some random white person, like in Canada, for example, everything about them is white. You know, they only speak English or like other European languages. Everything about them is just like your culturally generic white Canadian person. And suddenly like they blunt out to you, no, I'm actually not white. My grandma was from Central Asia. Who would buy that? Like some fucking dumb woke liberal? No one else really. And anyone in these replies who's pretending that they would is also obviously a joke. See, like, this is exactly what I'm talking about here. This person here. The people saying it are white leftists currently colonizing Argentina. Did I argue in favor of colonialism explicitly by saying that colonialism has benefited me, and people talk too much about the victims of colonialism and not enough about how much it has benefited me? No? There you go. Now you understand why her whiteness is relevant to this. Very simple stuff. There's a huge fucking difference, for example, between a white person who argued against Jim Crow and a white person who would say something like, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not racist or anything, but I think that people talk way too much about how bad things are here for black people and not enough about how good things are for white people like me. It's the exact same argument. And that these people just try to reduce it to a question of identity just goes to show how fucking dumb they are, how intellectually and morally bankrupt the American left and, well, these people aren't on the left. She's a fucking monarchist. These liberals are. Like, she sounds like a child. Like, there's no way around it. I'm not talking about the sound of her voice. I'm talking about the substance of her, what she's saying. She like talks like a 10-year-old child who just like learned that indigenous people exist for the first time. And is like, but yeah, okay, well, that's bad for them, but I like it here. I like to be Canadian. It's good for me. Let's listen to a little bit more about her to see what I mean about her sounding like a literal fucking child.
Windows. In Canada, I don't have to have bars on my windows. In South Africa, I do.
Like, there you go. It's just listing off things that she thinks are good about Canada for her. And by the way, from the perspective of white South African, white South Africans have everything fucking great. White South Africans are in the top 99.9% of average living standards of people in the world. And that's because they stole land, worked black people as borderline slaves. It's like cheap, like legally defined cheap labor for them, segregated from them, and reap the benefits of that. You know, the reason why whiteness is relevant here has little to do with like anyone's ancestry, like the specific color of your fucking grandma's skin or whatever, and everything to do with your social categorization as a white person in South Africa, which benefited you materially. It all comes down to materialism. It all comes down to something materially definable. But these people view race as something immutable, as like biological fact. So they essentially are reactionaries. Their views on this are not that much different to a reactionary. And I'm going to make a video after my next one, which is going to be in a while, about specifically how whiteness was constructed legally, which it was. Whiteness did not exist. Whiteness was invented. It was invented because black people were converting to Christianity, and slavery was defined along religious lines. Like, it was like, to be a slave, you had to be a non-Christian. And they were converting to Christianity. So it was required to define whiteness, to exclude them from whiteness, and that would justify them as being enslaved. Same thing in South Africa. Whiteness in South Africa was defined in the way that it was to privilege a certain class of people over another class of people, and to make those people like basically legally exploitable for the benefit of that upper class of people. We're not talking about anything that really exists in reality. We're talking about definitions that were invented in order to legally and morally justify injustices against huge groups of people that she benefited from. It doesn't fucking matter if your grandma was Central Asian, which is the fucking hilarious statement. Your Central Asian ancestry clearly means fucking nothing to you if you're not even going to pinpoint what Central Asian ancestry that is, and how it even affects you in any way at all. So yeah, absolutely fucking zero substance identity politics there. From someone who is just far too stupid to even begin to understand why what they said is stupid. Fucking like, seriously, Zionist, white South African, who moved to Canada and now apologizes for what is essentially Canadian apartheid by talking about how great Canadian apartheid has been for her. If anyone is a product of their material circumstances, that is it. That's about exactly what you would expect of an Israeli South African Canadian. Absolutely sublime. Basically, like, these people are just completely unable to engage with systems, material concepts, just an immediate retreat to like the cheapest identity politics argument imaginable. Like, she thinks that she can just get off the hook for this absolutely ridiculous shit that she says about everything by saying, well, guys, my grandma was from Central Asia. What the fuck does that mean? Your grandma was from Kazakhstan? I don't fucking care. In every meaningful respect, you're white. You fit the social categorization of white in South Africa, in any country in the world. Give me a fucking break. And it says a lot how bankrupt she is, because before I talked about her, I talked about a guy who actually is not white, and how his argument, which was very similar, like, I'm an immigrant to Canada, and I think everything here is fine and dandy, and instead of giving Indigenous people self-determination, we should just, like, you know, try to help them out within the context of the genocidal Canadian state. And I went just as hard on him as I did her. So these people do not understand how these, like the social construct of
Communism
race is linked to material reality. And yeah, she or any of these other like settler colonists who for some reason have made it their fucking their mission to defend settler colonialism at every opportunity, to attack decolonization, to be against indigenous self-determination every chance they get, to try and delegitimize it by equivocating it with Nazism when they in fact are on the side of Nazism, because Nazism was a settler colonial project which was heavily inspired by nations like Canada and the USA. So if you uphold those nations, you're the one who's on the side of the Nazis, buddy. You know, any of you, come here. Eristocracy TV, settler colonial anime girl, come on. I dare you to come on and try to talk about this. Try to deal with anything that I've said here